Hello. Kate Bush is one of the most innovative, idiosyncratic and influential musicians of modern times. She disappeared from the public eye 12 years ago after the release of her last album. Finally, she's back with a new record. But what took her so long?
I think it's always an evolving process. And I've compared the process to kind of making wine, where you let it kind of ferment on the tape for a few years and it helps it mature and it comes out sounding better. And I think in this case we're talking about a distilling process rather than fermenting, so it's like making a whiskey, really. A kind of double whiskey, because it's, you know, a double album.
In a special edition of Front Row this evening, I'll be talking to Kate Bush about the process of distilling musical ideas into the recorded sounds that are released next week on the album Ariel. It's the most eagerly awaited new LP of the year and the most closely guarded. To hear it, I had to make several trips to the record company offices, where I was allowed to listen, on headphones, to a CD copy which appeared to be locked in a machine bolted to the floor. Securing an interview with the famously secretive Kate Bush proved equally difficult. How to Be Invisible is one of several new songs in which Kate Bush appears to reflect on her 12 years out of the spotlight. In tonight's interview, she talks about protecting her privacy, the state of modern pop, and the difficulty of balancing time between the nursery and the studio after the birth of her son, Bertie. In 1978, aged just 19, Kate Bush became an overnight star with her ethereal musical interpretation of Emily Bronte's classic Gothic romance.
Windy moors we'd roll and fall in green. You had a temper like my jealousy, too hard, too greedy.
Wuthering Heights, Kate Bush's debut single, was a #1 hit. The first album, The Kick Inside, was an astonishingly sophisticated collection of words and music, most of which had been written when she was just 15. 6 albums followed, including the one regarded as her masterpiece, The Hounds of Love. But since 1993 and the release of The Red Shoes, virtually nothing has been heard from Kate Bush. Until now. We met recently in the penthouse suite of Abbey Road Studios. I started by asking whether, having been away for so long, she'd actually stopped making music completely during this time.
I did actually stop completely for a while, which is very unusual. Normally I go straight from one project into another, and it was a very conscious decision to take a break. One of the first songs that I wrote was actually King of the Mountain, and so that would probably be 9 or 10 years ago. And even the vocal that I did is the same one. It was just like a throwaway vocal that I put down on the track. And then I probably didn't record anything again for maybe 2 or 3 years.
Really? That's, I mean, so that song itself that's around at the moment, that's 10 years old in effect then.
Yes, it probably is getting on for 10 years, yeah.
Did it feel like you'd found something new, you'd started again, or was it just picking up where you left off?
Well, I think every time I make an album, I don't want it to be a continuation of what I've done before. It's very important for me that I feel that I'm doing something new. It's a shame that it's such a long process for me, because I worry that the ideas might sound dated or feel old-fashioned in some way.
Where does it start from? I mean, for instance, King of the Mountain, let's look at that as an example. Do you start with a lyric, an idea, an image in your head, or even a chord progression?
It was just a kind of chord progression that I had, and I just put this vocal down, which was extremely throwaway, which is why it's so surprising that I ended up keeping most of it as the master vocal.
So that's the demo vocal?
Yeah, it is, and I tried a few times to recreate it, and I couldn't get the same feeling.
Could you see the eyes of the women? Could you see the screaming and waving?
What's interesting about that vocal and the delivery of the words is the way you almost mumble them. I mean, in the past your diction has been so clear on record, and it sounds almost like you're masking the words. There's a sort of, you elide words, and it's almost like you're making them up as you go along, but which many people, when they're talking about writing songs, they say they just put the words in there and then come back to them later. You weren't doing that, but it's...
No, in fact it was meant to be my impersonation of Elvis Presley.
Oh, that's the drawl, is it?
Yeah.
What does a mountain really in there? Fill up his home with priceless junk.
In fact, I heard this fantastic review on Front Row a few weeks ago with some guy who was saying he'd heard the single, he was saying, it's only 2 chords. And then they were discussing it more, and he was saying how it's about Elvis Presley. And it sounded really surprised that I should have written a song about Elvis Presley, which I love. I love the idea of doing something that isn't expected.
And there's a sense of isolation, of remoteness, and Elvis is the key image. There's also a reference to Citizen Kane, isn't there?
Yes.
Randolph Hearst. And about fame as well, I guess, and people wanting to get at you. Was there a sense of autobiography in that song as well?
Well, I was very much writing about Elvis because I think he's one of those people who, I mean, that kind of fame that he must have been living with must have been unbearable. I can't imagine what it must be like. I don't think human beings are really built to withstand that kind of fame.
But you had that. I mean, you had that incredibly quick, not to the extent that he had, obviously, but you had overnight fame. You must have identified, to an extent, with the Elvis's situation about people clawing at you and wanting a part of you.
Well, I suppose there's an element of that. I think the process is hard enough without taking on other people's baggage as well.
You've always been a very private person, though, haven't you? I mean, even after you started out, you did very few gigs, and you did start doing fewer and fewer interviews. And yet the songs have always been, on the first few albums at least, incredibly personal, or they seemed like they were personal, seemed like they were autobiographical, incredibly candid, and people get a sense of the sort of person you were. Have you stepped back, do you think, in this album? I mean, it's a very elemental album, isn't it, about sea, sky, wind, and rain?
Well, yes, I am a private person, but I don't think I'm obsessively so. It's more that I choose to try and have as normal a life as possible. And I don't like to live in a glare of publicity. A long time ago, when I kind of finished making my second record, I realised that it was all the wrong way round. I was spending all my time doing interviews, television, press. Suddenly this was what my life had become. And my initial drive had never to be famous. It had been to make a record. So I turned it all around so that my time was being spent writing and then doing a little piece of promotion at the end. So, and to me that was the way that the balance worked best, because the creative process is something that I find very time consuming, and you have to have a lot of focus, and it comes from a quiet place. So this is what I'm trying to keep that balance of, which people seem to find very weird and strange, but to me it's completely, it's common sense, surely.
What must make it even stranger is that the world has changed, the music world, music industry has changed completely since that last record. I bought the Red Shoes on vinyl, and when I bought that record there was no such thing as an MP3. The internet hadn't been invented. Now file sharing, music is downloaded, music is borrowed almost from the ether and then sent back into space. Does it feel like a very different world that you've re-entered?
Well, I've still been a part of the world. It's just I've not been.
I mean, the music world and the industry and that sort of.
Well, yeah, but I think the whole world has changed very much so, very quickly in the last 10 years, but particularly the last 5 years. I mean, I remember when I was a little girl, if you saw people walking around on the street laughing and talking to themselves, you thought they were mad. But now it just means they're on their mobile phone. And, it, I think, would be a shame amongst all this technology for us to lose our sense of humanity. And music is suffering greatly from the overuse of computers and taking away the human element, which art is about human expression. And I think machines and technology should be used by people, you shouldn't be a slave to them.
Does it worry you the way that music's delivered now, increasingly down a wire?
It's not the delivering down a wire. I think the sound quality is something that it's a shame that that's deteriorating, really. But it was a very conscious decision for me with this record that I didn't write through a computer. A lot of my friends write on computers, so every time you hit a chorus in the structure of a song, you just have a repeat of the same chorus. Now, for me, that's not art, because It should be something that's evolving and developing as you move through a song and changing, not just the repetition of the same